Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Ahead is a story that might change the way you think about happiness. Imagine waking up in the morning. The sun is just barely touching the windows, and you feel calm inside. No worries, no rush, no unnecessary desires, just a sense of lightness and freedom. This isn't a fantasy. It's the ideal of happiness as Epicurus saw it. In a world where advertisements promise happiness in new purchases, social media in likes, and coaches in endless self-improvement, the philosopher Epicurus offers a completely different path, simple, logical, and surprisingly effective. He lived in ancient Greece more than 2,000 years ago, but his ideas sound as if he had been observing us in the 21st century. His philosophy isn't about how to live the right way, but about how to live happily. According to Epicurus, happiness shouldn't be sought in great achievements or immortal fame. It's found in the absence of pain, in peace of mind, in the ability to limit one's desires, and in simple pleasures, friendship, contemplation, food, and freedom from fear. But how can we achieve such a state? Why is it that limitations bring us joy? And what is stopping us from being happy right now? To understand this, we need to let go of the myths. Epicurus is not a philosopher of gluttony and indulgence, as he is often portrayed. He is a teacher of inner freedom, a man who managed to turn happiness into a science. A house in a garden, that's how the revolution began. Epicurus didn't build temples, and he didn't wage wars. He bought a house with a garden and started inviting his friends over. People came to him not for grand speeches, but for conversation, for peace, for clarity. It wasn't a cult, it was a school. There were no hierarchies there. Only students who wanted to understand how to live without suffering. He asserted that death, mortality, is nothing to fear. The gods do not interfere, and pain is bearable. Yes, happiness is attainable. 3 fears that kill joy. According to Epicurus, the main enemies of happiness are these fears. The fear of the gods. People lived in fear of divine punishment, of sins and retribution. Epicurus said, "The gods, if they exist, are perfect, and therefore they have no concern for our affairs." The fear of death. He said, "Death is nothing. As long as you exist, death is not there. When death comes, you are no longer there. It's pointless to fear it." The fear of pain. In his view, most suffering is exaggerated. Physical pain is either short-lived or bearable. And mental pain can be overcome with reason. Free yourself from these fears, and you're already closer to happiness than millions of others. The ability to desire less is the key to freedom. Modern people constantly want a lot of things. New things, experiences, money, status. But the more desires you have, the more anxiety, dependence, and pain you experience. Epicurus divided desires into 3 types: natural and necessary, food, water, rest, friendship, natural but not necessary, delicious food, comfort, unnatural and unnecessary, fame, power, wealth. He taught that the first bring joy, the second bring pleasure, but not always what you need, and the third bring only suffering. The less you depend on unnecessary things, the freer and happier you become. Here's a real-life example. Why can a rich person be unhappy? Imagine 2 people. One is wealthy, lives in luxury, but is constantly anxious about competitors, inflation, betrayal, and envy from others. The other lives modestly, eats simple food, reads, reflects, and spends time with friends. He is calm, he isn't dependent on whims. Which of them is closer to happiness? For Epicurus, the answer is obvious. Happiness isn't euphoria, it's balance. Epicurus wasn't seeking thrills. He was seeking ataraxia, a state of inner peace where nothing disturbs the mind. This doesn't mean being indifferent. It means being balanced and calm in any situation. not to reject the joys of life, but not to become their slave either. Why did Epicurus eat bread, water, and sometimes cheese? Epicurus could have afforded more, but he deliberately limited himself. His diet most often consisted of bread and water. Sometimes he allowed himself cheese and called it a real celebration. But why? To show that even the smallest pleasure becomes true enjoyment if you're not used to it. Constant excess dulls the taste, while rare joys make it sharper. He said, "If you want to be rich, make your needs modest." Voluntary poverty as an exercise for the soul. Sometimes Epicurus deliberately lived even poorer than usual. He encouraged his students to practice modesty, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food, giving up comfort. Why? To understand. If you know how to get by with little, nothing can break you. Then everything extra will bring you joy instead of feeling like a necessity. This isn't masochism, it's freedom through simplicity. Why is friendship the greatest pleasure? Epicurus considered friendship the highest form of happiness. Neither wealth, nor power, nor even love can compare to warm, sincere companionship. He wrote, "Of all the things that wisdom provides for living one's entire life in happiness, none is more valuable than friendship." In his garden, friends lived together, shared meals at the same table, and exchanged thoughts. There was no hierarchy, no hypocrisy, only trust. Modern research confirms people with close friends experience less stress, live longer, and feel happier. Epicurus knew this back in the 4th century BC. Why didn't he place love above reason? Although Epicurus was not against love, he was cautious about its consequences. Falling in love can lead the mind astray, create attachment, make you dependent, and bring anxiety. He preferred friendship because it is more stable, deeper, and freer from passions. That doesn't mean he rejected emotions. He just knew they shouldn't control you. Ataraxia and hedonism are the two ways. At the heart of Epicurus' teaching are two key concepts. Ataraxia, inner tranquility, when the mind is not tormented by fears, anxieties, or desires. Hedonia, meaning pleasure, but not wild or reckless pleasure. Rather, simple, natural pleasure that doesn't lead to pain. He said, "Not every pleasure should be chosen, and not every pain should be avoided. You have to think about the consequences." This approach makes you not a hostage to pleasures, but their wise master. Why is fear the main source of suffering? Epicurus wrote, "Most suffering comes not from the body, but from the mind." We worry about the future, torment ourselves over the past, fear loss, death, and pain. But these fears are illusions. By letting go of them, we find peace. He suggested, think about what you're afraid of. Break your fear down into parts. What about it is real? What can you control? A mind cleared of fears is like a calm sea. It reflects the world as it truly is, without distortion. A simple life isn't poverty. It's a choice. Many people think happiness is about having more. Epicurus believed the opposite. Happiness is being able to want less. This isn't about rejecting life. It's the art of choosing what matters most, appreciating silence, enjoying a book, and delighting in the morning sun. His ideal is a life free from want, without fear, and filled with meaning. Imagine you've achieved the goal you've been striving for so long to reach. You bought it, you won, you landed the job, you conquered. Joy. But soon it fades, and once again there's emptiness. Why does this happen? Epicurus knew exactly why. Not all desires lead to happiness. Some are deceptive. They're like a mirage in the desert. You walk, you spend your energy, you reach it, and then you want even more. The mechanics of desire. Why do we really want what we want? Epicurus analyzed desires deeply. He didn't consider them evil. He saw them as a mechanism that needs to be understood, not blindly followed. He divided all desires into 3 categories, and understanding this framework can literally set your mind free. Natural and necessary desires are those without which life is impossible. Water, food, warmth, rest, social interaction. By satisfying these desires, a person is happy. Natural but not necessary desires are the pleasures that make life more comfortable. Delicious food, a soft bed, beautiful clothes. They're good. But if you become attached to them, suffering is inevitable. Unnatural and unnecessary desires are things like fame, power, luxury, recognition, and adoration. These desires have no limit. Satisfying them doesn't bring peace. It only fuels the thirst for more. Why are many goals actually traps? Many modern goals are, in essence, desires from the 3rd category. More money, more followers, looking better, being more successful. But do they really make us calmer, more confident, or happier? Epicurus believed that chasing after unnecessary things is the source of anxiety. It's not success itself that's harmful, but the dependence on it. You achieve something and then fear losing it, you compare yourself to others. You feel like it's never enough. And yet, happiness was possible before all this chasing began. Dependence on desires. The reason for fear and stress. The more desires you have, the more enemies you have. Time, which you can't control, becomes your enemy. People who are more successful than you are when you don't live up to plan. And now you find yourself in a constant state of anxiety. But in the beginning, all you wanted was just to feel good. Epicurus suggests thinking, do I really need this, or was it just instilled in me? For example, a dream house. Let's say you dream of having a big house. Will you buy it? Will you be happy? Maybe. But along with it come loans, renovations, security, and anxiety. What if something happens? The house has become not a source of joy, but a source of anxiety. That's how any desire works if you don't know how to handle it. The paradox is, the less you want, the more you enjoy. Epicurus claimed that true pleasure comes not from indulgence, but from being free of need. When you're hungry, simple bread tastes better than a delicacy. When you're tired, a bench in the park feels better than an armchair in a restaurant. He wrote, "It's not the one who has much who is rich, but the one who has enough." Freedom is clarity. What do you really need in a world where your desires are shaped by marketers, algorithms, and other people's photos on social media? Epicurus' idea is like a sip of cold water. Ask yourself, what do I want? Why do I want it? What will happen if I don't get it? If you feel fear, anxiety, and panic, then the desire is unnatural. It doesn't lead to happiness. It controls you. Epicurus didn't build academies. He didn't give lectures in theaters. His school was a garden behind his house. There, among the trees and grass, he gathered his students. They talked, listened, stayed silent, and reflected. It wasn't an educational system, it was a space for living. Epicurus believed that nature clears the mind. In the garden, unnecessary desires disappear, and in the silence, you can hear what truly matters. Nature as a remedy for anxiety. Modern research confirms 15 to 30 minutes in a green area lowers cortisol levels, the stress hormone. Time alone with nature stabilizes breathing, improves sleep, and restores attention. Epicurus knew this long before science did. He simply felt that nature brings you back to yourself. He wrote, "Nature doesn't require much. A modest home, food, friendship, and peace. Silence isn't emptiness, but an environment for thoughts." In a world of constant noise, digital, visual, mental silence becomes a luxury. But it's precisely in silence that clarity arises. Epicurus didn't impose meditation. He simply taught how to be with yourself, without distractions, without fuss. He believed that true pleasure isn't loud enjoyment, but a gentle presence, when you are here, now, and it's enough for you. Freedom is living in a way that you're not ashamed of yourself. Epicurus's philosophy isn't about being a hermit, it's about conscious simplicity. He didn't urge people to run away from the world, but suggested not becoming its slave. He taught that happiness begins when your actions align with your values. Live modestly, think clearly, speak honestly, without showing off, without dependency, without fear. Who is the modern Epicurean? Is not the one sipping wine on a terrace. It's the one who knows what they want, doesn't depend on other people's opinions, who knows how to be alone. I appreciate simplicity, who isn't afraid of death and doesn't chase after fame. He can live in the city or the countryside, be wealthy or modest. The main thing is that his mind is at peace. The value of self-sufficiency. Epicurus often used the word self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean being a loner. It means you don't fall apart when you're alone. You don't need constant approval, entertainment, or to prove anything. You are enough for yourself. This isn't pride, it's maturity. We fear death because of it. We worry, rush to live, cling to everything. It's a shadow that moves with us. We don't see its face, but we feel the chill on the back of our neck. Epicurus saw it differently. He claimed, death is nothing. Not because he was indifferent, but because he understood that it's not a part of life. As long as we exist, death does not. When death comes, we are no longer here. This is probably one of the most famous Epicurean phrases. There's a deep logic behind it. Death can't be an evil because we don't experience it. A person only experiences what exists, and death is non-existence. When we are dead, we are gone. There are no feelings, no fear, no pain. The fear of death is an illusion. It doesn't come from death itself, but from our imagination. Fear as the foundation of slavery. Epicurus claimed, a person who fears death cannot be free. He will cling to everything, power, wealth, the opinions of others, just to postpone the inevitable. But someone who has accepted death becomes immune to manipulation. You can't blackmail him, you can't enslave him. Freedom begins where the fear of death ends. But what about pain? Can't death be agonizing? Yes, pain exists, but even here Epicurus was straightforward. Acute pain is brief and chronic pain is bearable. In any case, it is finite. He didn't say this just in theory. He died from a severe bladder illness. But in his last letter, he wrote that memories of philosophy and friends outweighed his physical suffering. What are we really afraid of when we talk about death? Death is just a symbol. In reality, we're afraid of losing control, of emptiness, of incompleteness, of being forgotten. But all of that is an illusion. Oblivion isn't frightening if you're not aware of it. Incompleteness isn't frightening if you've lived in harmony with yourself. Emptiness isn't an enemy if you know how to be with it. Epicurus was against the idea of the soul's immortality. Epicurus didn't believe in immortality. He thought the soul was material. It falls apart along with the body. After death, there's nothing. For many, that sounds frightening, but Epicurus believed that's actually a relief. If there's only emptiness after death, then there's nothing to be afraid of. No judgment, no torment, no fear. Just an end, like a deep sleep without dreams. For example, Are we afraid of non-existence before we were born? Epicurus asked, if you're not afraid of what was before your birth, why be afraid of what comes after death? You didn't exist for billions of years, and that never bothered you. So why should the same state after bother you? It makes sense, but it's not always easy to accept. That's why Epicurus suggested repeating this thought like a mantra, internalizing it, making it part of your worldview. Epicurus saw that the fear of death isn't just a personal anxiety. It's a social mechanism of control used by empires and religions. For centuries, rulers have used the fear of punishment in the afterlife, hells, and curses to control, impose, and forbid. Epicurus dismantled this construct. He said, the gods do not interfere, and there is no torment after death, because there is no afterlife at all. This was a challenge, but it wasn't a revolution, it was a liberation of the mind. Why live well if there's only emptiness after death? Many people asked, if there's nothing after death, why bother at all? Why be kind, just, or honest? Epicurus's answer is simple. Precisely because we have only one life, and all meaning is found in it. There's no need to wait for a reward afterward. We should find joy now. Live with dignity, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. Peace, friendship, reflection, and simplicity, these are the true rewards. It's not later, it's now. Power fears a person who is free from fear. Someone who isn't afraid of death doesn't bow to threats, doesn't chase after salvation, doesn't sacrifice their beliefs just to survive, and isn't dependent on authority. Such a person is dangerous to any authoritarian regime. They are immune to intimidation. Epicurus didn't call for rebellion, but he shaped an independent person who decides for themselves how to live and what not to fear. Death as the focal point of life. Accepting death sharpens your perception. You no longer postpone happiness, you don't live for some distant future, and you don't tolerate what destroys you. You start to appreciate every morning, the taste of simple food, silence, a friend's hand, the quiet of the evening. You begin to choose who to be with, what to listen to, what to spend your time on, because time becomes real. For example, a person who isn't afraid to die. You can see it right away in real life. They have a calm look. They don't panic, they're not in a rush. He does what matters not for likes, not for fame, but because he feels it's the right thing to do. He might be young or old, he might live modestly or be successful, but his strength is within because he's free from the main fear. He lives as if death is a friend, not an enemy. Epicurus didn't romanticize death. He just didn't let it control him. He taught people to live so that the end wouldn't be a catastrophe, but a natural conclusion to a good journey. To live the Epicurean way is like reading a book without unnecessary chapters, without artificial endings. Short, clear, genuine. Imagine, behind a stone wall in Athens, a green garden. No guards, no altars. Just the shade of trees, silence, and philosophical conversations over simple food. This isn't a utopia, it's a reality created by Epicurus. He simply called his place the garden. There, they didn't teach for show, they didn't build dogmas. They lived by philosophy there. Why a garden, specifically? Epicurus understood. Truth is revealed not in the dust of amphitheaters or under the shine of statues, but in peace, in a simple place where you can be yourself, where no one pressures you, where you can think, speak, and be silent freely. The garden was a symbol of rejecting hustle, showy knowledge, and the struggle for status. Who could come there? Epicurus' garden was one of the first spaces of radical equality in the ancient world. Women came there. In an era when philosophy was considered a man's pursuit, freed slaves, people of different ages, even foreigners. All were welcome in the garden. There were no elites, no authorities. Only respect for reason and the pursuit of happiness mattered. What did they teach in the garden? It wasn't a school like an academy. It was a way of life organized according to philosophical principles. Moderation in desires, constant self-awareness, the practice of friendship, freedom from fear, daily conversations, inquiries, and the search for truth. No one imposed answers there. Instead, they asked questions and learned to think honestly. Epicurus' principle of writing: he didn't leave behind a system, but letters. He wrote to his students briefly and clearly like a friend. And these lines have reached us, containing practical advice. Live inconspicuously, don't harbor empty hopes, don't fear the gods, practice philosophy for peace of mind, not for fame. These were personal pieces of advice, not manifestos. And that's the essence of Epicureanism. Why did enemies and the envious distort Epicurus? After the philosopher's death, his ideas were often misrepresented. He was called a glutton, a debauchee, a materialist in the worst sense. What? Because he was dangerous. Epicurus undermined the foundations. You don't need to fear the gods. You don't need to chase after fame. You don't need to suffer in the name of morality. Ideas like these destroyed the mechanisms of power, so they had to be discredited. An example of living the Epicurean way. Let's say you live in a small apartment, work remotely, eat modestly, but you have friends you can have heartfelt conversations with. You have time to read, and you have clarity about what you want. You are happy. You're an Epicurean, you don't need millions, you don't suffer because of someone else's success. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You just live and you feel good. Why is old age not a decline, but a liberation? In a society that values youth, speed, and strength, old age is frightening. But Epicurus considered it the best time for philosophy. He said, "When you are young, prepare for tranquility. When you are old, enjoy it." Old age is freedom from unnecessary passions, the ability to appreciate things, a subtle depth that youth does not know. There's no need to rush. You can simply exist. That alone is enough to be happy. Illness is not the end, but a reason to look deeper within yourself. Epicurus wrote to his friends even in the last days of his life, when he was suffering from excruciating pain. But in his letters, there were no complaints, only gratitude for the life he had lived, for memories, for philosophy. He taught that even pain can be a reason for awareness. When the body is weakened, the mind becomes your main support. And if you have trained it, it can endure anything. Poverty is not the absence of happiness, but the absence of excess. The world convinces us that happiness is found in things. Epicurus said, happiness is the absence of need. He ate bread and drank water, sometimes cheese, but he was content because he knew how to enjoy the simple things, because he wasn't dependent on wealth. True poverty is not the absence of money, but the inability to live without it. An example, an old Epicurean. He lives in a simple apartment. He doesn't have expensive things. He is ill, but he knows what he wants. He remembers what he's grateful for. He delights in the sound of rain, the light of morning. He doesn't complain, doesn't blame, doesn't envy. He lives as Epicurus taught, and he is freer than many. Gentleness is not weakness, but maturity. Modern culture admires toughness, strength, and assertiveness. But Epicurus taught gentleness in thoughts, in words, in judgments. Harshness breaks, gentleness bends, but does not crack. How can you strengthen yourself in the face of difficulties? Here's what Epicurus advised: repeat simple truths often, even if you already know them. Repetition brings stability. Surround yourself with friends. Not those who argue and demand, but those who are simply there for you. Don't live for the future. It's unknown. The present is all there is. Be grateful for the little things, for what you've been through, for clarity. Recognize what you can control. Let go of everything else. What is Epicurus's formula for happiness? It's surprisingly simple. Live quietly, don't fear death, get rid of unnecessary desires, enjoy the little things, value friendship, and reflect every day. All the depth of his philosophy is contained in these short phrases. First, live quietly. That means don't seek out noise. Epicurus didn't seek fame, awards, or recognition. He understood that all of this makes a person vulnerable. Fame provokes envy, wealth needs protection. Power brings fear, but peace comes when you simply live without trying to be someone in the eyes of others. Second, don't fear death, and your fears will lose their power. As we've already said, while you're alive, death isn't there, and when it is, you're no longer here. That's where freedom lies. The fear of death pushes us to make mistakes. We rush, we worry, we cling to things. But if you accept it, you start to live slowly and fully. Third, get rid of the unnecessary. To feel what truly matters, don't strive to have everything. Strive to know how to live with little, and then any joy will be genuine, and any loss won't be a tragedy. As Epicurus said, not the one who has much is rich, but the one who is content with little. Fourth, little things are the source of great pleasure. Simple bread, if you're hungry, is sweeter than cake. Water, if you're tired, tastes better than wine. A conversation with a friend is deeper than any motivational speech. When you're not used to excess, everything becomes a joy. Fifth, friendship is the support of the soul. For Epicurus, friendship was not a hobby, but the foundation of happiness. He considered it more important than family, love, or philosophy. Friends are those who are by your side not for personal gain, but for shared peace. He wrote, "Of all the things that wisdom provides for living one's entire life in happiness, none is more valuable than friendship." Sixth, daily reflection. It's like hygiene for the mind. Just as we brush our teeth and wash our hands, we need to cleanse our minds as well. Every day, Epicurus advised asking yourself, what am I feeling? What do I want? What is preventing me from being at peace? What am I afraid of? And why? Is what I have enough for me? This isn't a tedious practice, it's a vaccine against anxiety. Here's an example. A day, Epicurean style. You wake up without rushing, feeling grateful. You eat simple food, you work, but you don't burn out. Afterward, you take a walk, read a book, or have a conversation in the evening and reflect. No overload, no hurry, no living up to other people's expectations. It's not boring, it's profound. How did Epicurus die? He lived to be 72 years old. In his final days, he suffered from a severe illness, an inflammation of the bladder. The pain was excruciating, but even then, he wrote to his friends, "I am spending this happy day, despite my suffering, because I remember our conversations." He died not in despair, but in gratitude. His mind was calm, and his heart was full. Why is he still remembered today? He didn't fight wars, write grand manifestos, or found empires, but he gave more than many kings and generals. He gave people peace in the face of death. The ability to enjoy simple things, freedom from fear, friendship as the highest form of happiness, and reason as a foundation. Epicurus's ideas live on because they work without rituals, without teachers, without external conditions. Is it possible to be an Epicurean today? Yes. Especially today, when the world is noisy, anxious, selling, and demanding. Epicureanism becomes a quiet form of resistance. You don't have to play by someone else's rules. You can live slowly, choose your own circle, find joy in small things, listen to yourself, not fear death, and not chase after everything. You can take your time, not argue, not try to prove anything. You can simply exist and be content. How do you start living like an Epicurean? Start with questions. What do I want? Why? Do I really need this? Remove the unnecessary from your home, your schedule, your thoughts. Have a real conversation with a friend. No phones, no roles. Find 10 minutes of silence each day just to be. Remember, death is not an enemy, but a natural ending. Don't judge yourself or others. Judgment is wasted energy. Be grateful for the simple things, for bread, for water, for the sun, for the present moment. Epicurus's last words and our takeaway. In one of his final letters, he wrote, "I am writing this on the last day of my happy life, not because I do not feel pain, but because I remember our conversations, and in that I find a pleasure that overcomes suffering." He wasn't a superhuman. He simply understood what mattered and lived with that knowledge every day. If you want to be happy, don't look for complicated paths. Look within, get rid of the unnecessary, speak honestly, live simply, and don't be afraid. That's the art of being happy, according to Epicurus. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe, like, and share this video. Maybe someone close to you is also searching for peace in a noisy world. See you next time. And may there be quiet within you.